in my face, and I don't want to have to, I don't want to have to feel like we're being politically correct or I'm being told something or this or that.
Yeah, you should be able. That's like kind of my main thing right now. Is like you should be able to laugh at whatever you find funny. You shouldn't because laughing is not an experience that you have control over. Mm-hmm. It's like a sneeze. It's like I don't know. It's like a hiccup. It's like you laugh at what you find funny, and then when you see what I've been seeing from folks is like. In comedy shows, I observe audiences, and when I see people trying to stifle a laugh or they don't want to laugh at something that's not like politically correct,
right?
It's really sad.
Yeah.
And hello, guys. Welcome to the Chrissie Mayr podcast. We are on iTunes, YouTube, Spotify, and SoundCloud. And if you're listening to us on iTunes right now, please leave us a 5-star review. I will be recording my first comedy special this Thursday at Governor's in Levittown. It's going to be called Live from January 6th. Get your tickets from my website, ChrissieMayr.com, or you can go to the Governor's Comedy Club website, govs.govs.com. I hope to see you all there. I will let you guys know details on where the special will be distributed, where it'll end up. But I'm so excited to finally record this album. And I have lots more dates coming up after the 6th. I'm going to be in Florida in March. I'll be in Georgia. I'll be getting all around. But I'm so excited to have this guy in studio today. He's kind of famous. He's kind of a big deal. He is running for governor of New York. Andrew Giuliani, the one and only. Nice to have you here.
Chrissy, great to be on you. The only question I have is that Governor's Comedy Club, is that what Cuomo is running now that he's gone? I'm just curious.
Oh, my God. Where is he? What is he doing? I feel like he's disappeared.
That's why I'm asking. I think he's either underneath the Mario Cuomo bridge or he's living at his book executive's house because he's made him a lot of money, or maybe he's running this comedy club. That's my guess.
I know. He's going to have to pivot. And I live in Westchester, so there's still so many of us that refuse to call it the Cuomo Bridge. We're like, tap and see till the day we die.
It is the tap.
It's the tap. We got to take the tap. So yeah, we were trying to go live a little bit earlier, but now we're doing a regular recording, which is good. So maybe we're going to go over some of the same points, but so what, if you want to take us through, your dad, Rudy, was mayor of New York from 1994 to 2001. Mm-hmm. So he came into office when you were how old?
I was 7 years old.
You were 7 years old. And then I don't know if we have the clip, but then SNL did kind of a skit about this. So Chris Farley, I think it was in 94. Chris Farley played you on SNL, and it was the clip. I think they mashed it together. It was like your dad actually winning, and you were up at the podium with him. And then the Chris Farley version of it was he's like this huge guy in like an ill-fitting suit, and it's like so much physical comedy. He's like, Dad, he's got these like buck teeth, and then he ends up like just crawling all over. It's really, really funny. But did you feel like that was an accurate reflection of your enthusiasm that day? Do you remember how old
Probably,
were you?
Yeah. Mm-hmm. No, I was 7 years old, and what was happening was there were people I recognized in the audience, and I was just waving at them. There was one girl that I had a crush in, and I figured, well, I'm on stage.
Really?
So now's the time to actually go and wave at her. And the joke with my father is the reason why he's supporting me and pushing me so hard is he wants me to get elected. He wants to come to the inauguration. He wants to come and interrupt my inauguration. So I told him he's welcome to stay over at the governor's mansion. He's welcome to come to whatever dinners he wants, but he's going to get very bad tickets to the inauguration. We're going to put him all the way in the back there.
So what made you want to run for office?
Yeah, well, for me, it was just seeing what's happened to New York State over the last 15 years. The last now 4, at the time, 3 Democratic governors, now 4 Democratic governors between Spitzer, Patterson, Cuomo. Remember, all 3 of those gentlemen, they either resigned, Spitzer and Cuomo, and Patterson pledged not to run for election. He never actually got elected. He was Spitzer's lieutenant governor. So for me, it was seeing this culture of corruption in Albany and what it was doing, not just to New York City, but what it was doing to our state. After working in the White House for the previous 4 years under President Trump, my wife and I, we went down to Florida for a couple weeks in February. I figured canceled a lot of vacation plans over the previous 4 years. And I love my wife, so I figured, well, I want to stay married to her.
Take her somewhere warm.
Exactly.
Throw her in a pool.
Exactly. We felt the freedom in Florida that we hadn't felt in New York, this optimism we hadn't felt in a long time. And we made a decision. Hey, do we want to go Do we want to move out of state to get this, or do we want to bring individual liberties back here
This
to
was
New York?
this February?
This was this last February, 11 months ago.
Okay, so 2021. I know, it seems like 5
Yes.
years ago.
And it was obvious. We needed to make sure that in New York we were going to be here. We were going to fight, and we were going to, look. New York's not that far removed, if you think about it, from I think being the center not just of the country but of the world. I mean, we're 8-10 years ago.
We used
New
to
York
be,
City,
yeah.
absolutely. Absolutely. I mean, it was the center of commerce, right? We were the safest large city in the country. Unfortunately, we've had now multiple governors and a former mayor, thank goodness DeBlasio is a former mayor, who've decided to do the exact opposite in terms of a good governance playbook. That was handed to them, by the way. They've taken the opposite approach, and they've gotten the opposite results. We need to make sure that, first and foremost, we have a governor that's going to make sure that he does everything he can to bring back the quality of life in this great state. That starts with reducing crime and making sure that we have job creators here in New York, not leaving for Florida.
And I feel like, so many. I was trying to promote my special on January 6th at Governor's Comedy Club. I was reaching out to a lot of people I went to high school with out on Long Island. I went to Southside High School in Rockville Center.
Yeah.
And just about, I would say 70% of the people I reached out to have moved out of state.
Yeah.
And I learned this a lot through talking to Larry Sharp, who kind of... I attribute him sort of to my they call it gold pilling, when you sort of become more libertarian. And he really opened my eyes to, and this is pre-pandemic, like 2018, people moving out of the city and New York in general to go to North Carolina, to go to Florida. So I can understand, while Florida was, very tempting to you. And, while I can't, everyone's like, Chrissy, why are you still in New York? Get out. What are you still doing there? It's I can't for, work and family reasons.
Yeah.
But I do want to be kind of part of the people who sort of stay and fight, even if it's in a small way. And I'm sure you were feeling kind of the same thing.
100%, especially New York being in my blood from the time that I was born. We just couldn't decide to run. We had to make sure that we were a part of the change, and we kind of figured out, well, what's the best way to do this? We saw some of the current Republican candidates that were running. I had a bunch of different conversations with the president, with President Trump, and a few of the other people that were around him, and decided that the best opportunity here was to run for governor. We saw that there was no real other Republican candidate that was able to cross over and win the amount of independents and Democrats, and also rally the conservative base, hopefully the libertarian base as well, in order to make sure.
Libertarians are all over the place.
They're all over the place.
We don't know
They
what we're
are,
doing.
and you cross over, and I would certainly identify many of my stances as libertarian here. Look, I believe in less government. The one thing that government does really well is they screw things up.
Yeah.
That's the one thing, whether it's Washington, D.C. or Albany, the more government you have, the more bureaucracy you have, the more wasted funds and resources. I always think that taxpayers can spend their dollars a lot better than some bureaucrat that lives in a state capital or in our nation's capital.
Yeah, absolutely. So now we have Eric Adams, who just started, I guess, as of January 1st, new mayor. No, wait,
Yep.
God, I get them so
Mayor.
confused.
New mayor.
New mayor of New York. He's a Democrat. He was running against Curtis Sliwa, who I was really rooting for, not just because he was on my podcast, but because he's a great guy, and I think he's just such a badass.
He's probably a great interview too. I got to go back and listen to that.
That boy can talk. I
man.
could have packed it up and gone home, and it still would have been a great episode. Yeah, the stories he has, and just he's just a real salt of the earth guy, just a real New Yorker, and has been in so many fights. And I just feel like is just I don't know, really wanted to approach all the problems pretty head on that are happening in the city.
Yeah.
And
Curtis has been fighting for the city for 45 years.
Yeah.
From the Guardian Angels, and I've known him for over 30 years, going back to the '89 campaign. I don't remember much then. I was a little guy, but I remember him in his red beret playing stickball. And the thing about Curtis that you can tell, and it's palpable, is he loves this city. He's not doing it to gain more power. He really does it because he loves New York City. So I was campaigning for Curtis. I'm very honored that Curtis last week endorsed my campaign for governor. In terms of Adams, I'm hopeful that he's able to keep the promises that he's made to New Yorkers. If he's able to do that, then I think he's obviously going to be a vast improvement over DeBlasio, which is Not saying much.
The bar is so low.
That's not saying much.
So he'd have to really do something about crime, you think, to make a dent, to like get people's faith back in.
I think that's the first thing, right? I mean, when you think about businesses, when you think about families, the first thing that people want in New York is they want to make sure that they have their quality of life, that they don't feel threatened, that they don't feel in danger. And that goes from everything from violent crime, murders, rapes, obviously, assaults, to I think it's a matter of dealing with this homeless crisis that we have in New York, right? We didn't have this 10 years ago. Unfortunately, under DeBlasio, it's festered, and he needs to deal with it. If he does that, then you're going to have more people that are going to decide to stay. You're going to have more businesses that decide to stay. And guess what? Now your tax base has increased without raising taxes, right? You actually, I always think of it, you get to a point where there's an inverse relationship in terms of what you take in versus what you actually do with taxes. I think we're at a place in New York, in the state, where if you lower taxes, you're actually going to increase the amount of taxes that you take in. Because what's happening is, as you raise them, more and more people are saying, you know what? I'm going to Florida. I'm going to Georgia. I'm going to Texas.
People want to keep more of their own money. I mean, my parents couldn't get out of New York quick enough.
Yeah.
Like I was like, hey, you guys want to stay and come watch my shows? They're like, no, bye. And what you were saying about the homeless problem, I don't know if you saw the viral clip that was going around at the time that Sliwa his campaign was like in full swing. I mean, this was not a staged event at all. There was a homeless, kind of like mentally ill guy who sort of like came in front of, and like, I don't know, in comedy we call it heckling, but he was like sort of like came in front of Curtis when he was speaking, and like he actually like paused and like went away from the cameras and like talked to this. I mean, the camera still caught it, but he's like talking to this guy like a real human being, like, hey, do you need help? Like, I want to help you. Like, he didn't come off like a politician, and like that's what I feel like that's what people need, are politicians that don't come off like politics, just that are like real people, that are kind of like, hey, we don't like, that's the people who should be in power, are the ones that aren't power hungry and seeking it.
And having seen Curtis off the campaign trail more than on the campaign trail, having known him for such a long time, that's who he is. I mean, he started the Guardian Angels because he wanted to figure out a way to help the city when it was actually in worse shape than it is now. And that's why it comes off as genuine, because it is genuine. You know, he really cared about that person. He saw also what was going on in Penn Station at the Port Authority, which I think is where he had that press conference. And it looks like a third world country when you're walking through there. I mean, think about this, right? Yeah. If you have people coming in to the Port Authority, you have people coming into Penn Station, that for many people is the first and last impression that people get of New York. Yeah. So let's say you're coming in for business and you're thinking about bringing your kids to New York, and you all of a sudden, as you walk on the train, you see 4 homeless people that are lined up there, maybe now with a vial. I was on the subway about 2 months ago, and I saw a drug deal that went down. Is that going to make you more or less likely to come to New York? Probably a little less likely.
It's wild. Like I always take the subway. Well, if I take it, I get into Grand Central, and then like sometimes I'll take the subway, depending on where I am in the city, like from like Herald Square, and I'll get up to go to like the Compound Media Studio, and I always go up the same stairway, and I just about every time I walk up the stairway, there's somebody who is either like mixing up some kind of drug. I'm like, I don't even know the difference between these drugs. I'm like such a square when it comes to all that. They're either like shooting up, or they've been passed out and they've got like needles all around them. And it's really disheartening. And like one time I saw like kind of a younger girl like passed out with like needles all around her, and I went upstairs and like found a cop. I was like, I don't know if this is a thing people do, but like I feel like somebody just OD'd. Like, what do you guys do when you see this? And they were like, we really can't do much because like it's not illegal to have needles.
Exactly. And recently, you know, it was not being enforced for a long time, but recently Hochul signed it into law. It was passed by the New York State Assembly and the State Senate, where now hyperbolic needles, even if you have a substance in there, that is not that's not criminalized, right? That is not actually illegal anymore.
Wow.
And so because of that, the cops just can't do anything about it. So you literally could see a drug deal going on there. You can see a hyperbolic needle, and there's nothing you can do about it.
Is the argument that people could use it for like if they're diabetic or something? Is that the loophole?
No, I think the argument on the other side is we want to make sure that people have a safe place where they can do this. But what they forget about is, what about the rest of the community all around it there, right? I mean, when you look at some of these some of these, I don't know if they call them safe houses exactly.
Yeah, didn't DeBlasio like open up a new, like on the Upper West Side,
He
new like safe space where you could go and shoot up, which is like
it's a block and a half away from a school. So think about those kids right there. It makes absolutely zero sense. And also to think, right, when you think about allowing homeless to set up encampments on the streets, the argument is it's empathetic to do it. Well, if my brother or sister was dying on the street, literally dying on the street, would it be empathetic to just let them actually waste away to nothing? No, it wouldn't. You actually have to do something about it, while also not being a nuisance to the rest of the public there.
Right.
So
that's the thing, is like you get them into a facility. It's like they're not on the street because there's nowhere for them to go. Yeah. It's like sometimes they're stubborn, sometimes there's a mental illness issue, sometimes it's a drug issue. I just remember at kind of like the beginning of the pandemic and the lockdowns, like they were having homeless people like in the fancy hotels, like on the Upper West Side, and people were like upset about that. And that's not going to be good for tourism.
You had the Upper West Side liberals that rallied to get them out of there, basically. They actually ended up getting one of my father's deputy mayors, who I'm sure they hated until this moment, Randy Mastro, to represent them, to get them out of, I think it was the Lucerne's one of the buildings. I forget the name of the hotel that was on the Upper West Side, but they actually were able to get them out to Battery Park City, or maybe to Wall Street. And Wall Street rallied, and they ended up also acquiring a lawyer to do this. So it's, you have these liberals that are saying, well, it's okay as long as it's not in our neighborhood.
Yes, as long as it's not anywhere near me. Like, we wish them all the best.
Yeah.
I feel like the mandates are killing the city. Like, I'm somebody who doesn't want to get vaccinated. I know there's like a lot of people have had to force, like they get it so they don't lose their job. But the propaganda keeps saying New York City is back. Like any cab you get into, New York City is back, and it's like Broadway, and like you see these ads everywhere. Oh, it's back, theater. But you walk the streets of New York City, and you're like, it doesn't feel like it's back. None of the restaurants are crowded the way they were. Like even in Grand Central this morning, I came in at like peak commute time, and it's still like it was only slightly. There's only slightly more people than 2020 lockdowns. So it's very sad, and I feel like these mandates are like killing. Have they done irreparable damage? Like, what could you do if you won? Like, how would you try to turn this back, or do you feel like you can't really do that because you don't want to come off, I don't know, like conspiratorial, or like, because for me, I wonder if one of the challenges of running for office is like the fear of, if you come off a little bit like anti-mandates, are people going to call you an anti-vaxxer?
No,
I feel like it takes so little now.
I have no problem stepping up there and saying I am anti-mandate. I think the thing that you need to do more than anything is be honest with New Yorkers, right? You have to. We just saw that the acting commissioner of health, director of health, Bissett in New York, she lied, and she admitted to it. She lied about the child hospitalization rates in New York City. She took a very, very small subsect to claim that it was up 400%. That was over 50 people instead of actually all the children in New York City. This is recently.
Wow.
And then she ended up basically admitting at one of the next press conferences that we just did this in order to make sure that more children end up getting vaccinated. To me, it's just
how is that not criminal? Like you're tricking people.
Unbelievable. And the media, the leftists in the media, have no issues with calling it out. They just don't want to call it out because they have the same means to an end, right? They want to get as many people vaccinated as possible, whether or not the facts align with it or not, whether or not you're at high risk or not. And it doesn't even matter that we have other ways of treating this, whether it's monoclonal antibodies, whether it's hydroxychloroquine, ivermectin. I have to tell you, I think the worst thing that the media has done over the last 5.5, 6 years, and I've seen personally some of the terrible things that they've done, including to my father, the worst thing they did was politicize hydroxychloroquine early on because they did not want to let Trump get a political win. To me, it was criminal, and I think it cost the lives of tens of thousands, maybe a couple 100,000 American lives, because it was something that actually could have worked for a lot of Americans, and they decided to politicize it early on.
Oh, terrible. It's like anything Trump did or said, it was like it's like opposite day.
Yeah.
Even though he's been out of office for a year, people still are obsessed with him and take every opportunity to distance themselves from him.
Right.
And I'm sure that must have been hard, like for your family and your dad who worked closely.
Well, one of the things I see about my father now is just how resilient he is. You know, it's easy to be resilient or look to be resilient if you're on TV every day. But just in his personal life, his conviction on this and what he's seen, I mean, he's a guy who his entire life he stood up for the right thing, for justice, whether it was going after the 5 families as a U.S. attorney or whether it was turning around this great city. And he saw real issues with, obviously, the president being claimed to have been a Russian agent, and then certainly issues with the 2020 election, which, by the way, the media completely wants to whitewash, but there were issues. And the fact that that the media will not talk about it and continues to want to whitewash it should be a major problem for everybody. So for me, looking at him every single day to see his resilience, he just inspires me. He completely inspires me.
It's so true what you said about how they politicize certain drugs, and it's like, you know, ivermectin, hydroxychloroquine. It's like, I know that I'm saying all the things that are going to get me demonetized off YouTube. It's like, I don't even care. It's like these were drugs that have worked for decades to cure similar viruses, and same thing. Like, oh, Joe Rogan takes ivermectin. Oh, we got to call it horse paste. It's like Trump takes hydroxychloroquine. They got to call it fish tank cleaner. When basically I feel like aren't like Pfizer and Merck, aren't they all just like making pills now basically to sort of replace people's desire for these, you know, anything but taking the vaccine? I just feel like they're like, well, they can't make any money off of generic ivermectin or hydroxychloroquine, but they can make a similar drug now and
charge $550 a pill basically for it. I think, unfortunately, the self-interest that has really happened through the first 23 months of this pandemic, which, by the way, at this point, it's an endemic. I mean, we need to get on with our lives. We have all different ways of fighting this, all different weapons in the arsenal to do that. It's unbelievable to see just how the health community, the bureaucrats in the health communities, communities,
science,
it's unreal to see just the motives and the ulterior motives. And having seen it from D.C. for the first 10 months of it while this is going on, it's, I think, criminal in many ways.
What did you learn from your time, like, working in the White House?
Such a great question. I mean, specifically,
things I've seen.
Specifically when it came to the pandemic, I think it was just how there was a political motive with the bureaucrats in Washington, D.C. and the CDC. Right, the CDC is based out of Atlanta, but I think seeing how politics was being played, especially after the first month, I would say it was politics were put aside for the most part.
Right, nobody knew anything.
Exactly.
Yeah.
But then once we got to like the middle of April or so, it was just as bad as ever. And I think it was because there was a presidential election that was within the next 6 months, and that took precedence over the health of Americans. Right? I mean, think about Cuomo's decision to quarantine those unhealthy, those sick COVID patients, elderly COVID patients, back in the nursing homes with healthy ones, right? President Trump sent up the USS Comfort up the Hudson River to make sure that those sick patients had space, not where they'd be able to infect these healthy patients.
Right, and there were so many pop-up like tents, like even in Westchester, like a bunch of these pop-up tents that never got used at all, and they took them a really long time to like take them down, but it's like they were never busy.
Cuomo did not want to let Trump get a political win, and that's why he signed that executive order, and that's why probably 9 or 10,000 of those 15,000 seniors probably died because of politics. Had nothing to do with health. It had nothing to do with best practices, and unfortunately, we continued to see that happen, and for that, Cuomo got an Emmy, but obviously now we see that he's, gone the other way.
Yeah. I mean, he I guess they took it back from him. I don't know. He probably, it's not like anybody had to go take the statue back. He probably still has the statue, but they quietly remove his name from the list of winners. Yeah. Clearly, if it was about health, we would have heard people talking about vitamin D and weight loss and keeping your immunity high and supplements. And it would have been like, oh, here are all the different things we can use in our tool belt to help fight this. New drugs, old drugs, do whatever you want. And clearly this is, I mean, if at this point you don't see that it's about power and big pharma making as much money as they can, like I don't even know. I try not to get frustrated and like oh, you're brainwashed, you're stupid, because really people are dealing in different realities.
And I hate to bring up Florida again, but I mean the DeSantis model is exactly how you should do this, right? I mean, he has said we are going to give you the information in terms of what's going on in each county. We're going to trust Floridians to make the right decision. You have the option for the vaccine. If you, your doctor, and your family want to go that route, you have that. But you also have monoclonal antibodies. You have ivermectin. You have this. And the White House is trying to cut off the supply, has been trying to cut off the supply of monoclonal antibodies. So that way people really only have the option of the vaccine. It makes absolutely no sense except for the fact that there are ulterior motives.
It's so sneaky too, because like I got COVID in September, gave it to my boyfriend because I'm giving. It's the gift that keeps on
Very
giving.
Nice of you.
Antibody.
Early Christmas.
You know,
Very nice.
Natural immunity, right? Gave it to my boyfriend, give it to both his parents. Like, thank God everybody, you know, got over it and is healthy. But all three of them had the monoclonal antibody treatment, and it helped them all so much. And the more people I talked to, like, hey, have you done this? Have you done this? And depending on where you are in the country and apparently what color your skin is, it's been very hard for some people to get these treatments, which is crazy. Like I've read articles like, oh, would they deprioritize like white people because they're not as much of a risk? Like that's so insane to me. But I guess depending on like state or county.
Happening right here in New York too.
Yeah.
The same exact thing is happening, unfortunately.
And they didn't, I remember the doctor like didn't even offer up monoclonal antibodies. Like we had to be the ones to bring it up to our doctors.
Yeah.
Like, hey, can we do this? And they're like, oh yeah, I guess so. Let me check. It's like, why am I my own doctor? Why aren't you got the guys that went to school? Like, shouldn't you be suggesting this to us? But you really have to be like your
think,
own
right? I mean, you
advocate.
would think.
How did having a dad in politics shape your upbringing and your current political views? I know we've been kind of talking about that the whole time.
It's it's a tough question because ever since I can remember, he was politically involved. So I don't really know anything different.
Right.
But for me, it was, I think a lot of people in politics get jaded, and it's understandable why, especially looking at the last few years, why you
like
get jaded so quickly.
Yeah.
Yeah. And in so many ways, it can be like entertainment. And that's, I think, so much of how the media has covered politics over the last couple of years. It's about really, they've covered it like entertainers versus actually, hey, this is the best public policy, or we're going to report on multiple public policy proposals and will inform our constituents. But for me, what it really did was it inspired me to show that if the right person, and the right people, I should say, it's not just the right person, the right people are there at the right time, that you can really make a change that's unlike anything that a city has ever seen before. I mean, you look at New York in the early 90s, and you had 4 years in a row of over 2,000 murders a year. That number 8 years later got below 500.
Wow.
Even now,
where are we at? I was gonna say, where are we at now?
Right,
We're almost
right
there.
now it's almost 500. I think it was.
Okay.
I saw like 480 something, 486 murders or so.
We'll get
it
there.
Actually, unfortunately, if DeBlasio had another 4 years, we would certainly get there. So let's just. So for me, it was just a matter of looking and saying that, hey, look, there is no better way to affect people's lives positively, legitimately, than doing this. I mean, you think about that. What some of the public policy proposals actually did for New Yorkers. When you go from 2,000 murders a year to 500, that's 1,500 more New Yorkers a year that have their lives, and to me, it inspired me to be involved.
Mm-hmm. Wow, that's amazing. I can't imagine like how stressful it's been. Like I don't know like all the details, but I know like the leftist media like really came hard after your dad, especially when he became like more involved with like the election fortifying business that everybody knows happened, but we can't really call out still.
It's it's been nonstop, and it's really since he started going out there on the campaign in 2016 for President Trump, and then it ramped up again when he started representing him in the Mueller case in 2018. And then once it got to looking at the issues that happened with the 2020 election, by the way, I read myself over 200 of those affidavits of the over 1,000. Remember, there were over 1,000 affidavits that Americans signed under penalty of perjury. If that happened the opposite way in 2016 and there were 2 affidavits, the media would have made it out to be the worst, the biggest election crisis in the history of our country. I mean, look at what they turned the Steele dossier into. Mm-hmm. So the fact that they just completely whitewash it, and it's things that Americans have seen. It's the fact that all Americans aren't concerned about putting boxes over windows where they are counting votes, or in Philly where they're not letting Republican poll watchers who are legally allowed to be in there or pulling votes out from underneath the table after poll watchers. I mean, these are obvious things that we saw on television.
Yeah.
This is not something that anybody's making up. And the fact that there aren't questions about that, I call it the basic blocking and tackling of cheating. I mean, we're going to keep on calling it out because we're not going to have a country if we don't continue to call out these obvious things that ended up happening. One of the questions that leftists in the media always love to ask is Joe Biden the legitimate president? Mm-hmm. And you know what I say? I don't know. And that is a massive problem. The fact that I don't know who won the 2020 presidential election.
And we can't talk about it.
It's terrible.
It is
really
terrible.
Is terrible. And it's something that I think that, we were talking a little bit about this before. But when you think about liberal ideas, kind of the classic idea of classic liberalism and Milton Friedman and Reagan and all that, the left has become so illiberal.
Yes.
There is, whether it's science
Marxism,
and not wanting to have
Yeah.
debates over issues or when it comes to voting. To me, it's a matter of bringing some of those classic liberal ideas back and kind of this, trying to find out the truth on this issue.
Well, now if you're like in 2022, if you're a classical liberal, you're basically part of the alt-right. Like it's like you're either radical left or you're part of the alt-right. What was kind of like the worst thing that happened to your dad or was said about your dad through, just with his involvement in supporting Trump?
I think it was suspending his law license without a hearing. When you think about my wife is from Lithuania, and my mother-in-law, she told me about 7-8 months ago that the media reminds her more of Pravda than a free press. So Pravda is the old newspaper in the Soviet Union that they used to send out. Pravda in Russian translates to truth. So the paper used to say truth. So think of the New York Post, the New York Truth. That's what that was. And she said that the media reminded her more of that because they ultimately were pushing a message from the state. But to see his law license be suspended by 5 Democratic judges, 0 Republicans, without even a hearing, that was, I think, probably the worst thing that I saw specifically to him.
And what was that even based on?
It was based on him questioning what he saw in the 2020 election and representing the president, really, more than anything, not even questioning, representing the president of the United States.
Just having his back, which anybody who was even associated, I feel like they distanced themselves or they were so heavily criticized. Okay, I talked about, do you have a fear of sounding like conspiratory? No, because you're anti-mandates.
Obviously not, because I sound like it right now, right?
We're like just dipping a toe. I mean,
Well, unfortunately, if you want to speak the truth or find out about the truth, you're going to have, I think, some people on the left that are going to paint you as conspiratorial because they are afraid of the truth because it doesn't align with their political narrative. So for me, it's a matter of going out there and speaking the truth. And guess what? If people that have ulterior motives want to paint me as conspiratorial because they are more inclined to follow their narrative versus actually seek the truth, then that's fine. They can call me whatever the heck they want. But I think if we continue to push the truth, push the idea of finding the truth. Look, I don't know the truth on every single issue, but I certainly want to find it out, right? That's the whole idea of being involved in public life. You want to be able to make sure that you could find out as much as possible so that way you can make the best decisions as possible at whatever level, whether you're running for governor, whether you're voting on candidates, whatever it actually is. So for me, seeing just how far the left has gone on this, and like we said before, they're not liberal anymore. They're illiberal.
Yeah, it takes almost nothing to be considered a conspiracy theorist. And in fact, you can say things that are true. Like the CDC is coming out now and saying, oh, cloth masks are actually like kind of useless. But like, is that changing any of the mandates? But if you were to say that, people go, oh, you're a conspiracy theorist. And that's just that's an insult that I think the left can slap on you to shut you up and to intimidate you. Just like if you're talking about how bad CRT is, they go, oh, you're a racist.
Yeah.
And that because no one wants to be called. And now it's like these insults are losing their strength. It's like it means almost nothing
They're
anymore.
the boy who cried wolf. That's what they are. They're going to keep on doing it. And critical race theory, it's certainly something I talk about almost everywhere on the campaign trail. Before it became popular in Virginia, we saw it here in New York. Critical race theory then turned into diversity, equity, and inclusion, DEI. Mm-hmm. And they just rename it because it's not popular, critical race theory. So that way when people find out, well, critical race theory is being taught in schools. So critical race theory is something that's only taught in law schools.
Right.
Well, it's critical race theory 101, let's put it that way. And now it's diversity, equity, and inclusion, but it's a fantastic way to divide kids at a very, very young age. Or when you think of gender dysphoria being taught, right, to 7-year-olds. I've got a little baby girl who I am just, so over the moon about at 5 weeks old. But I can't imagine as a first or a second grader her being asked, do you feel more like a boy or a girl? Maybe she likes to play soccer. I'm certainly going to have her out there playing golf and doing all that stuff. And if she's playing with the boys at 7 years old, she might say, I feel more like a boy. Well, she doesn't need to learn about, hormone blockers and stuff like that at a point where it can harm her reproductive system. I don't remember what the question was. We certainly got down something here, but
no, it's absolutely child abuse. It's like kids are not like they're not even thinking about that. Like you're not even a sexual being yet, and so it's like really gross. It's basically child abuse, and it's like I had a tomboy phase. Like I had a phase where I didn't like boys or didn't like that I was a girl. I mean, like a lot of my 30s, I didn't like boys. It's like, it doesn't mean that you're to chop off your nuts or I don't know, like change your gender. It's so crazy. But it is. But
think about if you were a kid and at that time when they say that, then all of a sudden they start kind of giving you the idea, well, you can actually take these these hormone blocking medications in order to do that. You're then potentially harming that person's reproductive system for the rest of their lives.
Yeah. It's not an easy fix back.
Yeah. No, it's not. I mean, I look at that as child abuse, plain and simple. So, it's just another way where the left has seemed to have gotten control, not just in education, but of our kids' minds. But we're seeing more and more parents that are stepping up for school board, running in there, that are concerned with their curriculum. And that's one of the things that I talk about in New York. It's giving parents more choices, whether that means more charter schools here in New York State, whether it's a tax voucher program, so that way parents can send their kids to parochial schools with their tax dollars.
That makes sense.
Yeah, absolutely, right? I mean, it shouldn't be bureaucrats in Albany that are the primary stakeholders in our kids' education. It should be every single parent and their child that are looking and are deciding with their curriculum and saying, hey, look, is this actually working? One of the schools that I went to early on in the campaign was PS 156, which is in Queens, in Laurelton, Queens. Their math proficiency rate at graduation is 21%.
Oh, no.
Yeah, think about that. Literally, 4 and 5 of those kids don't have a chance walking out of there. Now, why don't those parents have more options to be able to send their kids to private school or to homeschool with their tax dollars or to a charter school? They absolutely should. And guess what? If they have those options, then all of a sudden you're going to get the teachers union that's going to look and say, hey, maybe we should care about performance of our students instead of just protecting the worst teachers of the bunch. Yeah. So for me, it's really giving parents more choices when it comes to education. And that's, I think, another reason why you're seeing families leave. We talk about crime. We talk about the economic impact of overregulation and overtaxation, where we just compete with California to be the highest tax state in the country. But, I mean, don't underrate education in terms of a reason why New Yorkers are saying, hey, I love New York, but I can visit a couple times a year. We need to make sure that parents have more choices here in our great state.
Yeah, definitely. My sister is a teacher. Like, we're from Long Island, so she was like tenured out. She taught at Hicksville. She's one of the sane teachers. She's one of the few like not crazy cat lady types. That's not like
Don't tell Curtis that.
We see the TikTokers like I came out to my second grade class today. It's like nobody cares. Your kids don't freaking care. Like they don't care. Like, stop making it about you. Like your classroom is not a chance for you to have a one woman show. But my sister's like, normal teacher, but she would talk to me all the time like this pressure, and she moved out to Vegas. She teaches there too. It was so funny. Like, when she first moved out there, she was like, I don't understand why like my lessons that I used from New York are not like resonating with these students. And then she learned that like Nevada was like 50th in the country for education.
Oh,
like
really?
They were. Yeah, and a lot of them end up just going into like EMT or working for the casinos because that's like it's Vegas. It's what they do. But I hear her tell me like a lot like there's this pressure to just like kind of like pass the students through. And it's like,
Right.
well, then when are they going to hit reality? Like when they're in college, when they're adults? Just, I don't know. That's a whole mess.
Makes sense in Vegas, right? You either work for the casino or emergency management because you're either in the casino or you're, in an emergency in Vegas, right? So
Or you're like, getting a mop to clean up a bachelorette party. So we have some viewer questions, some
Yes.
questions from the fans that heard that you were coming on. Okay, this question is from my friend Gavin. Giuliani used the cabaret law to get New York City, your dad, not you, to get New York City regulated. It's a retarded law, but it worked. Does he think it was worth it?
Well, it's a good question. I actually have not asked him if he thinks it's worth it. I do think that there certainly was. It allowed him to have the resources, the police department, to have the resources to be able to go into some of these underground areas, not the ones that were run legally, but I think one of the things, and I think this doesn't really get reported, is how much the mob had control of many of these nightclubs in the 70s and 80s and even into the early 90s. That never gets talked about. One of the, at the time, during the Stonewall uprising, that was owned, I believe it was by the Gambino crime family, but it was certainly owned by one of the mafia families. And they, on purpose, owned many of the gay bars in the West Village and around New York, because then that way they could find judges, people that were important, that were going in there, that were frequenting them.
We saw you.
Right?
Yeah.
At a time when all of a sudden, now you got the pictures and you own that person or this person.
Wild.
So that was one of the motives there. So when you look back at that, I think it was a great way to get some of these establishments to go legitimate. I don't know if that necessarily is the best path, or certainly something that I would propose nowadays. I think New York's nightlife is one of the things that attracts so many people to New York, and as long as it's a legitimate business, then we want to make sure that we're doing everything we can to put less regulation on legitimate businesses, not more regulation. So, you got to look at the entire context of it there. And in looking at that, I think in seeing certainly where the mob had their fingers, that was one area, right? Like the Fulton Fish Market, for example. At the time, they owned the Fulton Fish Market, and it was a real massive issue. Or when you look at the sanitation business, right? They were a massive part of the sanitation business, and you had small businesses that were being charged 2.5 or 3 times, basically extorted in order to have to use a mob-owned sanitation company.
Wow.
So in looking at the cabaret law at the time, it was really a matter of making sure you get the mob out of there. But we want to make sure we're doing everything we possibly can to get people and businesses back in this great state. And these mandates, enough with the mandates,
They're crippling. It's really, and people are sick of it too. It's like, the virus has now mutated to like, Omicron is a joke. It's a cold. It's like, a lot of us have the same cough. Big deal. Get over it. It's nothing to like shut down schools all over again.
I feel like a third of the people that I know have this at this point. And thankfully, everybody's been very, very mild. So.
That's what's important. It's like nobody's really like dying from this anymore. Another question. I don't want to come off as rude, but how the hell does he expect to win as a Republican? The last Republican governor. This is a question from, I think, my friend Marshall. The last Republican governor of New York was Pataki from 95 to 2006. A lot has changed politically in this state to secure a Democrat for governor since then, although of those, 2 resigned due to sex scandals and the other 2 were appointed in their place.
Well, I like the second half of that question, but I'll address the first half of that question. So the way you need to win as a Republican in New York State, you have to win, depending on turnout, somewhere between 30 and 33% of New York City, right? The population center in New York City, you got 8.5 million of the 19.5 million people that live in New York State live in New York City. So as a Republican, you can't get blown out. One of the things that Curtis showed, Curtis won about 29% of New York City, which was the most of any Republican mayoral candidate in about 15 years.
Wow.
So one of the things that he showed was that the numbers are really lining up in terms of what we need to hit from the city, and then driving up in these red areas are vote totals. And we also saw that with the big wins in Nassau County, Suffolk County. There were big wins in Erie County, Buffalo.
Long Island's going very red.
Going very red.
Very exciting.
I'm telling you, I have heard from more, and these are, anecdotal stories, but still, I have heard from more, not just Republicans, but a lot of independents and even some Democrats that are just very unhappy with how big a part government has been in their lives recently, and how it just seems to be with every single legislative session. It's just, how much more will government become a part of my life? I think you could probably relate to that as a libertarian there.
Oh, yeah.
But for us, it's a matter of making sure that we can compete in New York City and then drive up votes all over the state. One of the things that we see that's different than our Republican competitors in this, in looking at the polling, is we actually have 25% of Democrats that find my candidacy favorable. And that number with independents is above 50%.
Wow.
So that's something where the other Republican candidates, they're around 12 to 15% with Democrats. I think we not only drive up the Republican base, but we also are able to cross over to the independent and Democratic base just with common sense ideas like, hey, guess what? We want decision making to go back to you, not bureaucrats in Albany making the decisions for you.
It does seem like so much of this is common sense.
It is. It really is.
But that's exciting that like the initial numbers are looking very good.
We were very, very happy seeing the numbers that we needed to see on election night this last year. Obviously, we wanted Curtis to win. We were pulling hard for him, and he put up a heck of a fight. And I got to tell you, he is, as we said before.
He really cares.
He cares. He really cares.
Yeah. Okay, last question. Will the Giuliani name and the Trump Association help or hurt him? Both names elicit a lot of emotion.
Well, the one thing, we definitely elicit emotion. I think, when you hear Trump or Giuliani or even Sliwa, people have an opinion on that. Look, I'm not a prognosticator. I can't tell you whether or not it will positively or negatively affect. The only thing that I can tell you is, in looking again at 2021, and this is not just in New York, I think this is also in New Jersey. I think it's looking at the Virginia governor's race. Democrats overplayed the Trump Association. I worked for the president for 4 years, and I'm going to be genuine, and I'm not running away from that. I'm very proud of a lot of the changes that he made in this country, and I want to make sure that we make some of the same changes from a financial standpoint, certainly from a health standpoint that we ended up seeing with President Trump in New York State. But as Democrats continue to paint every single Republican as Trump 2.0 or Trump mini-me or whatever the heck they want to do that, I think more and more voters look and say, well, wait a second, he's not in office currently right here. What are you even doing? Plus, this is a state race. So for me, it's a matter of putting out good ideas. And a lot of those ideas I learned from the president working in the White House. A lot of those good ideas I learned in watching my father govern this great city. So I don't run away from it. I genuinely like to say that, I learned from, I think, two of the most effective change agents in our country's history, but certainly in the last 50 years of our country, which was Rudy Giuliani and Donald Trump.
Yeah. Wow. Did you have a lot of interaction with Trump?
I mean, I would say if it wasn't every day, there were some days where it was 2-3 times a day. There were other times where, it would be once or twice a week. I'll tell you one story. This is probably 6 or 7 days after things shut down from the pandemic, so probably around March 20th or something like that. He called me about an issue I left the White House around 12:30 at night. I got home, went to bed. He called me at 1:57 in the morning. Talked for about 2 minutes, went back to bed. I fall asleep. Calls again.
Do you have him
at
saved
5:27
Do you have him saved in your phone as like something else, or do you just have like Donnie?
Definitely is something else right there. Definitely. But it's funny. In D.C., it never would show up as a full number. It would only show up as the area code back, when he was president calling from the White House. So it would just be 202. It would show up.
You can't do a star 69. Yeah.
Exactly. But he calls again at 5:27 in the morning, 3.5 hours later, and he sounded completely awake and full. And my alarm was set for 5:45 in the morning. I'm like, does this guy ever sleep?
That's what I hear, is that he needs no sleep, and he eats McDonald's, and he's just crushing it and has all this energy all the time.
I don't get it. I mean, the guy, I saw him 2 weeks ago down in Florida, and he's 75 years old, and he's got more energy than most 50-year-olds.
Yeah, he lost weight. He looks good. I think after he calmed down and like de-stressed a little.
Yeah. He looks good. I mean, it was inspiring to see his energy in the face of what were every single day the media and so many Democrats just going after him and trying to tear him down day after day after day.
I haven't seen anything like it. Like in my lifetime, I've never seen someone be so hated and just so attacked consistently.
Yeah, and it started literally from the time he went down that escalator.
Yeah.
And they didn't want to give him a chance, right? You think about even after he got elected, we first started hearing the Russia collusion myth. I think it was that Thursday or Friday. I think I first heard it the day that he traveled down to the White House to meet with Obama. That's the first time that CNN started spewing it out there.
They had that ready to go.
Unbelievable.
Yeah.
Really unbelievable. So.
Wow, it's exciting though. I'm really excited for you. I feel like we covered a lot. I feel like we talked about everything. Oh, the video. Okay,
yes.
yeah, okay.
Oh,
I don't know if
stuff.
I'm excited. I don't know if we're gonna get it to work, but let's play. Yeah, let's play this.
Let's see if this is the Farley one or the real one over here.
It might be a combination of both. So this is from the 1994 SNL when I think Chris Farley was doing his impression of you.
That's what I told Spicer when Melissa McCarthy played him. I told him that the next day we were going in for a meeting, and I said, Melissa McCarthy's not bad, but it's not going to top Chris Farley.
I wonder if we can hear it through the...
Let's hear.
Oh yeah, we can. Can you hear it?
Yep.
Okay.
He's taking his 7-year-old son.
So you're
Andrew
7.
into the podium.
Oh, that's little you.
The law and order candidate.
There's my sister in the pink there, just kind of showed up. She was much better behaved than I am. She still is.
Oh.
There we go. I think I still have that same tie. Looking at it.
This is before you got braces, obviously.
Yes, exactly.
You had a little bit of an overbite.
Right there.
Oh.
So, well, as I said, I was looking at people that I knew in the crowd. There was actually a girl I had a crush on, and that's who that kiss was for.
Who did you have a crush on? What was her name?
Her name was Deanna. That was her name. So I haven't talked to her in a couple of years. I don't want to,
Deanna,
hopefully
if you're
my
out
wife
there,
is not listening to this part of the
Deanna,
podcast.
no, just reconnect his buds.
But
did you see this right when it came out?
No, I didn't see it until after it came out. I'm trying to remember when I first saw it. But the thing that's kind of make this live on was this is on Farley's Best Of. This is, I think, the first one on his SNL Best Of DVDs, if we even were watching DVDs anymore. But I guess when you stream it, you go right there, and that's me, doing all kinds of crazy stuff there.
Did you jump on the podium at all, or are you just very excited?
I don't think I jumped on the podium.
Okay.
I'm pretty certain no. But I definitely was waving. I came in, I cut in his speech and said the chorus of his speech, it can be so and it will be so. Because I was up the night before reading through the speech with him. He would kind of have me there, and he'd turn over, read the speech, and I'd take the page, and I'd kind of look through it there. And, it's 7 years old. I'm not memorizing the speech, but, New York, we can change New York and make it the greatest city in the world. It can be so and it will be so. We can bring homelessness down to a level where New Yorkers can feel safe. It can be so and it will be so. So that was something that stuck in my head, this chorus of, hope in New York.
So you actually remember parts of your dad's speech from when you were 7 years old?
I remembered, I would say I remember the part there where he kept repeating it, that part.
Wow.
I don't remember the whole speech, but I remember that part.
Remembering any part of it, I'm impressed that you remembered any of it. Like, I don't even know what the hell I did yesterday. That's really cool. So I'm glad we could show you that, a little trip down memory lane there. Andrew, thank you so much for coming on the show. It was so great to talk to you, both on and off camera. No, you're the same guy. You've nothing to hide. You're not squirrely.
And I got to tell you, I don't know if we should share this with your audience, but I did probably almost like a DeBlasio last week where I just didn't even show up. Like, I and not anybody else on my team, I wrote it wrong in my calendar and had the wrong date there. So I want to thank you for inviting me back, even though I stiff-armed you before coming in. So you're just
that's
awesome
okay.
and
Yeah,
wonderful
like
for
you
having
called
me
me right away. That's when I knew you weren't a flake, because you called me right away, and you're like, oh my God, I'm so sorry. But I've had people, it happens. Like, people get their schedules messed up.
Life,
Yeah,
2021. But 2022 is going to be a better year.
It sounds better. I hope it's better. Yeah, I'm excited. Do you have any New Year's resolutions, or you don't do that?
To win. That's the New Year's resolution.
Yeah.
Let's win. That's it. I mean, it's definitely losing a few pounds too. I was actually the closest to my wedding weight that I was on announcement day. I was about 5 pounds away, and now I'm barely fitting in suits. So, when you go all around the state, you realize, you're going to Binghamton and you try the Speedy, which is a sandwich
My
with
sister
chicken.
went to Binghamton.
Okay,
yeah,
so the Speedy. But whenever you go into town, right, you say, well, what's the best dish here?
Yep.
You're never getting like a tossed arugula salad with it.
No, it's bread, it's cheese.
It's a 4,000 calorie meal. So needless to say, I ended up putting on a little bit of weight. So it's to at least stay in the same suits throughout the campaign. It's going to get expensive if I put on another 5 or 6 pounds.
Goals to fit in your suit. So
Yes.
what is the timeline for, I guess, when people can vote, or, what is like the time? How's the timeline going to go for
So
this?
the primary for the Republican nomination is June 28th. And the election day is November 8th.
Okay.
As I mentioned before, we've seen in 4 statewide polls now, the 4 that have been released, we've consistently held a 15 to 24 point lead. This last poll had us up 17 points for the Republican nomination. So we've continued to see this grassroots strategy really take hold. And one of the things and one of the ways that I wanted to run the campaign early on is making sure that we were going to mass gathering events, whether it was NASCAR up in Watkins Glen. For some reason, the GOP did not have a structure at NASCAR. And you think about it, it's 140,000 fans, probably 139,000 of them are traditionally Republicans or libertarians or conservative ideals.
Yeah.
Why wouldn't we go out and engage with those people? Doing a lot of county fairs, there was a big agricultural event south of Syracuse. So finding where maybe the Republican Party was not necessarily going to and trying to meet as many New Yorkers as possible. Certainly now in this primary, ones that would lean more Republican or conservative, but we're happy to talk with as many New Yorkers of all different ideas. And I think this is why in the polling, we're seeing that my candidacy has certainly resonated more with Democrats than any other Republican of recent time. I think even, and I never like to compare my polling numbers to President Trump because they're certainly better, but amongst Democrats in New York State, we actually poll better than President Trump does in New York State. So I think that's just a matter of really showing up and New Yorkers seeing that, look, we do care and we legitimately want to take this state back and give people their individual freedoms back.
Yeah, I think it's a good time to run as a Republican because people are just looking for a change, and the Democrats have like really dug themselves a hole. I don't know. It's just I think people are really sick of it. So I'm really excited for you, Andrew. Where can people find you and follow you, or like throw money at you if they're really huge fans?
Yeah, throw money at me if you see me on the street. Absolutely.
Yeah.
Go
Coins.
Go to nyforgiuliani.com. That's NYFORGIULIANI.com. And if you could donate or volunteer, we'd love to have as many people on the team as possible. Certainly, whatever donations, throw coins, throw bills, throw crypto at us. We accept crypto.
Yeah.
Absolutely accept crypto. And then you could follow us on all platforms at Andrew H. Giuliani on everything. So you'll see we've been traveling the state, and we're going to keep on going for the next 10 months. I can't believe it's 10 months and 5 days now. So
it's going to fly by. 2021 flew by. So.
It did.
Yeah.
And 2022 is going to be better. We're going to see,
Yes.
I think we're going to really see that New Yorkers are looking and saying, look, this is a year, this is a turning point year in our great state. As nice as it is to go down to Florida occasionally, we want to make sure that New Yorkers have their liberties back here in this great state.
Right. We need our bagels. We need our pizza.
Absolutely.
We can't bail on New York just yet.
Exactly. It's the best bagels, the best pizza in the world, the best food in the world. I mean, think about it. New York has been the economic center of America since the Dutch West Indies Company, since they established here. When you think about the Erie Canal and what that did over 200 years ago to New York, it connected economically the rest of the world to the United States of America, all through New York. New York is the lifeblood. We are the pulse of this great country, and I really think of the economy in the world. And that's why it makes me so sad to see jobs, businesses leaving this great state, and that's why we need it back here.
Well, we're definitely rooting for you, Andrew. Thank you so much for coming on. This was great, and we'll keep in touch.
Thank you, Chrissy. I got to come out to a show, by the way.
Oh,
there,
yeah,
so
definitely.
I wonder if I'll be able to sit with Cuomo at his Governor's Comedy Club during this thing.
Yeah.
I don't know if the title might turn him off from coming or not. Maybe it should be like all hands on deck or something like that at Governor's Club or whatever.
Yeah, I don't think Cuomo will be at my show, but I will save you a seat in case you're listening, Andrew. But yeah. I like a different Andrew now.
Yeah.
Andrew Giuliani.
You know, we were starting saying, you know, MAGA, make Albany great again. That could work, but
I
I
like
think
that.
it's make Andrews great again because
Yeah,
name
Andrews
Andrew's been tarnished.
Andrews
so.
have taken a dive. So
Yeah.
yeah. Well, thank you so much for coming on. It was great to meet you.
Chrissie, thanks for having me. Really, this was a lot of fun.
Okay. Yay. Bye, guys. Sweet.